The entertainment press can be a trip, but I'm going to review 15 stories of this red carpet debut featuring Meagan Good and Jonathan Majors. They're looking real positive. They're looking real happy, and I'm sure they're driving everybody crazy over at Rolling Stone and the New York Times. Let's start with The Root and Deadline. The Root starts out with a really silly-ass first sentence. I don't know what they're trying to prove here, but what's interesting to me, and I have a feeling this is a trend that will continue through most of these stories, is once again the word misdemeanor just happens to be left out. So we're doing third-degree reckless assault and harassment in a domestic dispute. But nobody says the word misdemeanor. I just find that to be interesting. The rest of the piece pretty much could have been written by AI. Speaking of it could have been written by AI, Deadline. Jonathan Majors makes appearance at AAFCA Special Achievement Awards event after assault verdict. They act like the verdict was yesterday or something. Okay, then we get into the piece, and of course, Deadline does what Deadline does. They mention that he was found guilty of reckless assault and harassment. Then, of course, they skip down, and in paragraph 3, they say sentencing for his domestic violence convictions. No mention of misdemeanors, none of that, because, of course, if we do that, we would be telling the readers that it was a minor misdemeanor offense. Now, keep in mind, this is the Jonathan Majors that is so crazy and abusive that women date him for years at a clip, and then people who are named after queens of Egypt text him all the time, and women chase him down the street. And then women are laying naked on his bathroom floor. You see how hard Grace is trying to stay away from him? Wow. She's doing a sprint. She should try out for the Olympics. Oh, that video is hard to ignore. Let's get back to Meagan Good, the appropriately named Meagan Good. There's some nice headlines here. You see Hello Beautiful with the picture perfect headline. There's some positive stuff here. And really no problem mentioning the trial. It's just how you mention the trial. And again, I'm amazed that word misdemeanor is just missing in action. With the Jonathan Majors gushes over Meagan Good, so in love after conviction. So they get it in, but they don't really get it in as hard as putting assault sentencing or whatever. And by the way, if you can fit all these other words in the headline, make red carpet debut month before, blah, 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 you can fit the word misdemeanor in there. You could definitely fit the word misdemeanor in there. Jonathan Majors and Meagan Good make red carpet debut. That was a very prevalent headline that a lot of people used. I'm going to go take a closer look at the People magazine article. I have a feeling I know what I'm going to find, but I will reserve judgment. And what do you know? People magazine actually does have the word misdemeanor in their story in paragraph 4. I think they're the only news organization that has it, but I'm not done yet. That's a surprise, but if you're going to do it and bring it up all the time, damn it, at least be accurate. People has been interesting, but at least they had misdemeanor in there. Entertainment Tonight did a lot. They actually had photos, and they quoted what the counts were exactly as the law reads, and then they quoted the ABC interview. They actually went into some detail there, which when you're quoting documents and you're quoting interviews, that's usually a good idea journalistically. The Daily Caller actually writes a pretty normal story. They sort of refer to the trial as his legal challenges, and then they talk about, wow, these two are together and they look great, and then they close the story. It's probably one of the best in terms of positivity. I think the Griot might be a Wire story. It seems to be a copy of one of the other stories. Once again, it wouldn't surprise me, and I'll probably do a video on this, how AI is going to impact the journalistic trade. You can see some flecks of just really rewrite, copy desk type stuff going on here, although Entertainment Tonight, I got to commend them. That was an original story. But at any rate, this is a fairly positive story from the Griot, and the Griot is owned by Byron Allen and is a much better version of the Root, kind of what the Root used to be when it first started. And so good to see a positive story from a black publication, a black-owned publication. Of course, what would really be unbelievable is if one of these black publications actually stood up for Jonathan Majors, actually paid attention to the trial enough to realize that the evidence in the case pointed in the opposite direction of the verdicts. So, what happens is no one is really paying attention, because if they were and they were looking at the evidence in the case, they would really be talking about this case all the time. It's also an interesting thing to note, just as a side note, that in these photos that you see of Meagan Good and Jonathan Majors, he looks a hell of a lot happier than he did in any of the photos that we've seen with anybody else he's been with. And photos tend to be that thing that just doesn't lie. They look great, and, it really does show in the photography. And looking at USA Today, they have misdemeanor in the first paragraph. That's a rarity. That's good news for a bigger paper. They go into detail about a 6-person jury decided this, and that toward the bottom of the story. It's sort of funny. They go over what Jonathan Majors is wearing in the second paragraph of the story, or the third paragraph of the story. So, it actually makes sense as a piece of journalism structurally, because you're stating the obvious, you're stating the facts in the first paragraph, then you're saying where they are, what the event is, and it's just sort of funny. They go into fashion on the third paragraph. Essence keeps it pretty positive, but does go into a bunch of stuff. It's interesting, but mostly positive. Essence magazine is Black-owned. It's owned by Richelieu Dennis, who is the owner of Shea Moisture. Interestingly enough, Richelieu Dennis was falsely accused. I think it was back in 2020, and then he was exonerated. There was an anonymous group of people, allegedly from Essence magazine, that put something up on Medium, and then it flamed out and turned out to be nonsense. But the New York Times sure blew it up when it came out, although they did come back and say that an investigation cleared him. So Essence is Black-owned. This is sort of an interesting piece. They do have a nice, big, positive photo, unlike what Deadline did, which was run a photo of Jonathan Majors standing there alone. Essence did what most everyone else did, which is run this very nice, positive, nice-looking, portrait of Meagan Good and Jonathan Majors. I mean, it's just common sense that you would do that, but particularly with a headline on the top that says this is their red carpet debut. At any rate, pretty good story. Interesting. They have actually 2 photos. That's nice. So they kept it positive, and they kept it newsy. Very interesting takes and very interesting ways that these publications are slightly different. And you can see the desperation in some of the publications. Obviously, Deadline must not be getting that much traffic, because they really do resort to some sensational language. They love putting the words domestic violence in there repeatedly in every story they do. You can see the signs of the clickbait, the signs of the traffic desperation. There are also some strategic partners that some of these publications have that explain that as well. I will go over that at some point. We'll see what happens next. Good luck.